Hello and welcome to the second instalment of the Elder Scrolls podcast and the first on our new dedicated channel. I'm Cinder Games and once again I am joined by my friend and co-host Penguin.
Hey!
It's certainly been a while, but now we're ready to get back into making these podcast style discussions. We've taken in your feedback, so hopefully this episode will be an improvement upon its predecessor. So, without me rambling on for any longer, let's get on with the discussion. Today we're wondering, if Bethesda made the Elder Scrolls 6 in Akavir, how would the races there work gameplay-wise?
We recognise that this is somewhat of a long shot, but to be honest, it's not outside the realms of possibility that Bethesda will add NPCs from Akavir within the next game. Therefore, despite the conjecture, this is still a valid conversation to have. First, a brief description of Akavir, for those of you who don't know what it is. Akavir is a continent to the east of Tamriel, and no game has been set there yet.
Additionally, there are 5 races which we are going to be covering today. The Akaviri, the Snow Demons of Kamal, the Serpent Men of Saesi, the Monkey People of Tang, and the Tiger Dragons of the Capoton.
First, we'll talk about the Akaviri. They're the humanoid race from Akavir. Both physiologically and culturally, they're similar to the Nords of Skyrim, and we know this as they appear on Alduin's Wall in Karthspire.
However, due to their similarities with an existing race in the game, there is little point in discussing them in this episode, as they would work in a very similar way. So, let's move on to the next race.
Similar to the Frost Atronachs of Skyrim, the Snow Demons of Kamal are tall humanoid creatures made of ice. They thaw out once a year to mete justice out among their enemies.
So, these people are quite a lot like the Frost Atronachs, so we think they're going to have lots of similar abilities to those. So, one thing me and Penguin were thinking of is possible area of effect damage. And additionally, they could have sort of frost spell damage to stamina if they were hit.
So, very similar to what frost spells were like in Skyrim, pretty much. And also, due to their very sort of large height, it's about the same size as Frost Atronachs, they'd be very, very physically powerful, but they would have a very, very slow attack speed, somewhat like the two-handed weapons in Skyrim, as opposed to something like a dagger or a sword.
They would also be quite weak to fire spells, we thought, because obviously they are snow demons.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the Frost Atronachs had something like was it a 50% weakness to fire? Additional weakness? Something quite similar.
So yeah. The Kamal actually invaded Skyrim in the Second Era and overran Windhelm before being driven back. Our next race has also marched their way into Tamriel, or should I say slivered. There exists some controversy over whether the Saesi are humanoid or serpentine, but for the purposes of this episode, we are going to assume they are serpentine, as this gives us more opportunity to theorise.
Therefore, our description of the Saesi is a human body with a snake tail from the waist downwards, with the entire body covered in scales.
Now, the Saesi in some accounts, not all of them, but some, have been described as somewhat vampiric and preying on humans, and therefore we were thinking that quite an interesting trait for this race to have, if they were added to the game, would be to have some of the, I guess you would call them abilities that vampires had, sort of the need to suck people's blood every couple of days and stuff like that.
And the sort of health drain spell, that sort of thing. Just those sorts of effects, and also progressive vampirism, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that'll be really good. Additionally, we were wondering how the snake tail would work instead of legs, because obviously there's not been a character yet in Skyrim that hasn't had legs, really. NPC.
Yeah, I mean, on a side note, there are creatures in Greek mythology which have, say, 2 snake tails for legs and work that way, so we don't really know because there are rather limited sort of renderings of the Saesi that we can find. So it's really quite open to your interpretation, or our interpretation, as to how we think it's really going to go. Another thing we were thinking is for movement speed, we were thinking that they would maybe have something a little bit extra added onto their base movement speed. No jumping probably, because that'd be quite tricky with snake legs, let's be honest. But probably a faster movement overall, which would be definitely keep the player on their toes if they were fighting against them, and be a nice benefit if the Saesi were a playable character. So about the weapons as well, there were They're very good with two-handed weapons, aren't they?
Yeah, and both two-handed and dual-wielding, sort of just lots of the powerful weapons. They generally tend to use katana-like weapons, so they're quite similar to the blades. Actually, the blades were inspired by the CSE, I believe. So from vampiric snakes to monkey warriors, Akavir certainly lives up to its potential.
Yes, indeed. Very little is known about the Tangmo. Besides that, they are monkey-like creatures of below human intelligence and capable warriors, having defended their lands from multiple slavery expeditions, particularly from the Kamal.
Now, we were thinking they'd be quite hard to add to the game engine, because arguably they're the least humanoid race, although the way we imagined them is sort of like the Falmer, in that sort of coming around on four legs kind of thing.
Yeah, they're quite stooped.
Yeah, but looking like a monkey.
Yeah, and mainly NPCs we were thinking of. But however, we were thinking maybe that they would have better sort of jumping or mobility, and that would be very, very that'd be the worst nightmare of, say, a combat archer, to have these sorts of tracer-like, Overwatch tracer-like monkeys jumping around everywhere and being really, really difficult to hit.
It also gives some opportunities for parkour sort of things.
That'd be pretty awesome. So we were thinking for abilities like a monkey cry, so something a bit like the Nord battle cry would be quite good for this build.
Ideas of a sort of baboon screaming come to mind.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, so personally, I find that the Tangmo are a little lacking because basically they are a monkey version of the Falmer. But now we're moving on to my favourite race, actually, in the whole of the Elder Scrolls series. I think they're really cool, and they also have a lot of potential to be a really great character, the Capoton.
These mysterious felines are similar in appearance to the Cathay and Cathay Rat Khajiit of elsewhere, and like their fellow cats, are excellent warriors, taking the fight to the Sayesi after they consumed the human population of Akavir. During this war, their leader, Toshraka, transformed into a dragon, which would be very intriguing from the abilities point of view, as we have not seen transformations on this scale before.
So, we were thinking that the Capoton would be quite similar to the Khajiit, because they're basically tigers. So they would have a lot of similar things to what the Khajiit have. They would have increased unarmed damage and bleeding damage, sort of like the Khajiit with their claws.
So we thought they'd also be very sort of physically strong and imposing like the Cathay Rat. So they'd have more resistance to defense, they'd be very tanky, and they'd be very muscly.
A really, really big cat. And they'd also, and this is the coolest bit, probably have some kind of dragon-esque ability, so dragon breath even, or dragon armor. But it'd be quite hard to balance this, because obviously having a character who can transform into a dragon is kind of overpowered.
It's like the monkey people, they can make enemies go away for 10 seconds. The Capoton can turn into a dragon. There's quite a lot of disparity there. So it would have to be something of a similar level to the dragon aspect shout in Skyrim, but maybe on steroids. So it would be just a lot more overpowered, but not so overpowered that it would be completely impossible for Bethesda to balance, that sort of thing.
We both think that if any of these races appeared in the Elder Scrolls 6 as NPCs or even playable races themselves, that they would produce many enjoyable and fun possibilities. The Kamal, Sayesi, Tangmo, and Capoton are all so different to anything that we've seen before, and would certainly bring with them a whole roster of interesting abilities. So all that's left to say now is thank you for joining us, and if you've been watching this on YouTube, then feel free to leave a comment below. So I've been Cinder Games.
And I've been Penguin.
And it's goodbye from both of us.